Step into the ancient world, a land of gods, pharaohs, and timeless stories. In this world, Cleopatra VII emerged as a woman of unparalleled influence and intellect, the last pharaoh of Egypt, who defied the odds to shape history. Her name has become synonymous with power, beauty, and intrigue. But who was the real Cleopatra? Was she merely a seductress, as some historians painted her, or a brilliant strategist who sought to preserve Egypt's sovereignty in a rapidly changing world? Today, we unravel the life and legacy of Cleopatra, a woman whose story transcends time. Born in 69 BCE, Cleopatra VII entered a world of grandeur, turmoil, and relentless intrigue. Her birthplace, the illustrious city of Alexandria, was not just the capital of Egypt but a beacon of ancient civilization. Founded by Alexander the Great, Alexandria was a cultural melting pot where Greek and Egyptian influences intertwined, creating a unique and vibrant atmosphere. The city boasted magnificent architecture, libraries filled with the wisdom of the ages, and bustling marketplaces that drew scholars, merchants, and adventurers from around the Mediterranean. At the heart of this city, the Ptolemaic dynasty reigned, a family of Macedonian origin that had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. They claimed descent from Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's most trusted generals. But their rule, though powerful, was far from stable. It was marked by intense internal conflicts, bitter sibling rivalries, and the constant threat of Roman expansion. The Ptolemies, while clinging to power, often found themselves navigating a fragile balance between their Greek heritage and the rich traditions of the Egyptian people. Amidst this backdrop of splendor and uncertainty, Cleopatra was born. She was not just another royal in a line plagued by treachery and discord. Even as a child, her sharp intellect, insatiable curiosity, and natural charisma made her stand out among her siblings. She was educated in the sciences, arts, and philosophy, and unlike many of her Ptolemaic predecessors, she embraced the Egyptian language and culture, a rare and significant distinction. Yet, Cleopatra's journey to greatness was anything but assured. She was born into a family where power struggles could mean exile, or worse. How did this young girl, surrounded by danger and deceit, rise above it all to become one of history's most enduring figures? Her story, like the land she ruled, is one of resilience, ambition, and unparalleled brilliance. Unlike many of her royal relatives, Cleopatra was not content to merely exist in the shadow of her family's prestigious name. While the Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, it had done so with a legacy often marked by internal conflicts and external challenges. But Cleopatra, from an early age, made it clear she was not just another member of the royal family. She sought to carve out her own identity, one that was as intellectually formidable as it was politically astute. Tutored by some of the most renowned scholars of the time, Cleopatra's education was vast and varied. She mastered subjects that were crucial to the governance of her kingdom: philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. But what truly set her apart was her natural aptitude for languages. Cleopatra became fluent in multiple tongues, including Greek and Latin, the dominant languages of the time. But perhaps most importantly, she learned Egyptian, a language that her Ptolemaic predecessors had often disregarded. This wasn't just a personal achievement for Cleopatra. It was a deliberate and powerful political move. By speaking the native language of Egypt, she wasn't just embracing the culture. She was making a statement. Cleopatra's ability to communicate in Egyptian gave her a unique connection to the people of her land, setting her apart from other rulers who had seen themselves as foreign conquerors rather than leaders of the Egyptian people. Her mastery of Egyptian allowed Cleopatra to bridge the gap between the Greek-speaking elites and the native Egyptian population. It was a skill that would become invaluable as she navigated the complexities of ruling a kingdom with deep-rooted cultural traditions. It would prove to be one of her most powerful assets, an ability to unite her people through shared language and understanding, earning their loyalty and strengthening her reign. As Cleopatra's story unfolds, her intellectual prowess, combined with this deep cultural connection to Egypt, would prove to be not just a tool for survival but a foundation upon which she would build her remarkable legacy. Cleopatra's early life was far from the luxurious, secure existence many might imagine for a royal heir. Instead, it was a world steeped in danger and uncertainty. The Ptolemaic dynasty, though powerful, was infamous for its brutal internal politics. In the palace, Alliances were as fragile as glass, easily shattered by betrayal or ambition. Assassinations were common, and rivalries between siblings were not merely sibling rivalry. They were bitter, often violent struggles for the throne. The very halls of Cleopatra's home, with all their grandeur and beauty, were also a breeding ground for deception, manipulation, and political maneuvering. For Cleopatra, this environment of danger was not something she could ignore. From a young age, she learned that in the Ptolemaic court, survival depended on more than just wealth or royal status. It demanded sharp wit, an understanding of strategy, and the ability to read people and situations with precision. She saw firsthand the lengths to which family members would go to secure power, and how quickly one's position could change in an instant. These lessons, though harsh, were invaluable. They shaped Cleopatra into a ruler who was not only capable of navigating the intricate and often perilous world of court politics but also someone who could outthink and outmaneuver her enemies. The palace, with its lavishness, was a place where Cleopatra's intellect and resilience would be put to the test daily. It was here that she learned the importance of alliances, the cost of betrayal, and the necessity of preparing for danger at every turn. These early experiences would become the foundation upon which Cleopatra built her legendary reign, helping her rise above the intrigue and power struggles to ultimately become one of the most iconic figures in history. At just 18 years old, Cleopatra found herself thrust into a position of immense responsibility, a role that would shape the future of Egypt. She became co-ruler of the kingdom alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was just a boy at the time. While the title of co-ruler suggests a shared partnership in power, the reality was far from harmonious. The Ptolemaic dynasty had long been characterized by its internal strife and power struggles, and Cleopatra's ascension was no exception. Cleopatra, with her sharp intellect and vision for Egypt, sought to govern independently. She recognized that Egypt, a kingdom of immense wealth and cultural significance, was deeply fractured. The internal conflicts and growing external threats required a strong and decisive leader, someone who could restore Egypt to its former glory. Cleopatra saw herself as that leader. However, her ambitions and clear vision for the future of Egypt clashed with those of her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and his advisors, who were resentful of her authority and growing influence. The tension between Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII quickly escalated, as Cleopatra's attempts to assert herself were met with increasing opposition from her brother's camp. What started as a political disagreement soon turned into a bitter power struggle, one that threatened to tear the kingdom apart. Cleopatra's defiance and growing ambition were seen as threats not just by her brother, but also by those in the court who feared her rise to power. As the conflict reached its peak, Cleopatra was forced into exile, driven from her own kingdom by the very family members who should have supported her. At a time when many would have seen this as the end of their political career, Cleopatra's exile marked the beginning of her rise to greatness. Rather than crumble under the pressure, she took this setback as an opportunity. Cleopatra's exile was not a defeat. It was a stepping stone, a moment of transformation that set the stage for her most daring and brilliant moves. This was the point where Cleopatra's true resilience and political savvy began to shine. Rather than giving up, she used her exile to rethink her strategies and seek new alliances that would eventually pave the way for her return to power. It was from this period of adversity that Cleopatra would learn to navigate the complexities of power, politics, and survival in the dangerous world of ancient Egypt, and it was this experience that would help her rise to become one of the most iconic and powerful women in history. Exiled from Egypt, Cleopatra faced a future that seemed uncertain and grim. The kingdom she was born to rule had been taken from her, and her position seemed hopeless. But Cleopatra was not one to accept defeat or dwell in despair. She was, by nature, a survivor, a strategist, and a woman with a vision for her future. Rather than succumb to her circumstances, she chose to turn her exile into an opportunity, one that would set the stage for her remarkable comeback. Cleopatra understood that, in a world ruled by power, influence, and shifting alliances, she could not afford to act alone. If she wanted to reclaim her throne and restore Egypt to its former glory, she needed a powerful ally, someone whose backing would give her the resources and political leverage to challenge her enemies. It was at this critical juncture that an unexpected opportunity arose. Julius Caesar, Rome's most influential and powerful leader, arrived in Egypt in 48 BCE. Cleopatra, ever the tactician, saw her chance to turn the tides in her favor. She knew that Caesar's support could provide her with the military and political strength she needed to defeat her brother and claim her rightful place as Egypt's ruler. But rather than simply seek an audience with him as a typical royal would, Cleopatra devised a plan that would make her impossible to ignore. In one of the most daring and legendary moves in history, Cleopatra arranged to be smuggled into Caesar's palace. She had herself rolled up in a carpet and secretly delivered to Caesar's quarters, where she dramatically emerged before him. The symbolism was profound. Here was the exiled queen, hidden away and yet determined to make her presence felt. The boldness of her entrance captivated Caesar, but it wasn't just her dramatic arrival that caught his attention. It was her intelligence, her charm, and her political vision. This audacious act did more than just secure Cleopatra's place in Caesar's presence. It marked the beginning of her triumphant return to power. Caesar, impressed by Cleopatra's resourcefulness and determination, decided to back her cause. With his military support, Cleopatra was able to confront Ptolemy XIII and his advisors, ultimately defeating them and securing her position as the undisputed ruler of Egypt. Cleopatra's return to the throne wasn't just a personal victory. It was the start of a new era for Egypt. With Caesar's help, she not only reclaimed her power but also established herself as a formidable political figure, both in Egypt and on the international stage. This pivotal moment in her life demonstrated her extraordinary ability to turn adversity into opportunity, to seize power when it seemed most elusive, and to use her intellect and boldness to reshape the course of history. Cleopatra's story doesn't end here. It's only the beginning of a tale filled with alliances, battles, love affairs, and the unwavering ambition of a queen who refused to be silenced. Stay tuned as we explore how Cleopatra's brilliance and resilience shaped not just her destiny but the history of an entire civilization. Cleopatra VII's life was one of extreme highs and devastating lows, but it was also one of remarkable resilience. As the last pharaoh of Egypt, she inherited a kingdom embroiled in both internal conflict and external threats. At just 18, she had become co-ruler with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, but what should have been a glorious partnership quickly turned into a bitter rivalry. Cleopatra's decision to govern independently, and her refusal to be a puppet of Rome led to her exile. The ambitious young queen, however, was far from defeated. In exile, Cleopatra was not passive. She understood that regaining her throne required more than just military strength or political maneuvering. It required allies, powerful ones, and none were more influential than the rising empire of Rome. At the time, Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in the world, and his involvement in Egyptian politics could shift the balance in her favor. But Cleopatra was no ordinary queen. She was a shrewd strategist, deeply aware that she needed to make an impression on Caesar. Something grand, something unforgettable. History remembers her as a seductive beauty, but those who truly knew her also recognized her intelligence, political astuteness, and tactical genius. In 48 BCE, Cleopatra seized an opportunity. Caesar had arrived in Egypt, drawn there by a series of events that threatened his interests in the eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra saw this as the moment to strike. Instead of relying on traditional royal channels to gain access to Caesar, Cleopatra orchestrated one of the most daring and infamous entrances in history. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's quarters inside a rolled-up carpet, secretly delivered to his private chambers. When the carpet was unrolled, there she stood, alive, present, and unmistakably royal. This dramatic entrance not only captured Caesar's attention, but also signaled to him that Cleopatra was no ordinary woman. She was a ruler who would stop at nothing to regain her throne. She understood that in the political game, you must be bold, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Caesar was, of course, impressed by her audacity. He wasn't just captivated by her beauty, but also by her intelligence and the clarity of her vision for Egypt's future. What followed was a partnership that would alter the course of history. Together, they made quick work of Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy XIII. With Caesar's military support, Cleopatra was able to defeat the forces loyal to her brother and secure her position as Egypt's ruler. This marked the beginning of a political and personal alliance that would shape the trajectory of Cleopatra's life and the history of the ancient world. After the defeat of Ptolemy XIII, Cleopatra was restored to the throne. But her victory was not only personal. It also served as a major political move that allowed her to secure Egypt's place in the shifting world order. Her reign, now consolidated, was bolstered by the presence of Julius Caesar, whose support gave her the legitimacy she needed to rule effectively. In 47 BCE, a child was born to Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. The child, Ptolemy XV, known as Caesarion, would become the living symbol of their alliance. Cleopatra presented her son as the heir to both the Egyptian throne and the Roman legacy. By calling him Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar, she solidified the notion that her son was not only her successor but also a potential bridge between the great Roman Empire and the ancient kingdom of Egypt. Cleopatra's decision to raise her son in the shadow of both Egyptian and Roman power was a calculated one. She understood that Caesarion's presence would strengthen her claim to the throne, both in Egypt and in the eyes of Rome. In a world where dynastic succession was everything, the birth of Caesarion symbolized a new political order, one where Egypt and Rome were intertwined. Yet, while Cleopatra saw Caesarion as a way to secure her dynasty, not all Romans shared her view. Many in Rome were uneasy about Cleopatra's growing influence. The Romans feared that Cleopatra's connection to Caesar might give her too much power, not only in Egypt but also in Rome itself. As the mother of Caesar's son, Cleopatra now represented a political threat to the stability of Rome's republic. Her presence in Rome would spark controversy and fan the flames of rivalry among Roman elites. The political maneuvering around Caesarion would ultimately have far-reaching consequences, both for Cleopatra and for the future of the Roman Empire. As a woman, Cleopatra had to navigate a world dominated by men, and she did so with extraordinary skill. But in presenting Caesarion as Caesar's son, she not only secured her own position but also placed herself at the center of a much larger struggle for power. Cleopatra's presence in Rome created a media storm. Rome, the greatest power of the ancient world, was struggling with internal political tension, and Cleopatra's arrival only intensified these struggles. Cleopatra's arrival in Rome was not just an endorsement of her political marriage to Caesar, but also a testament to her growing power and influence. During her stay in Rome, Cleopatra and Caesar lived as a couple in the public eye, flaunting their relationship in a way that many in Rome found scandalous. Cleopatra's status as a foreign queen, her unapologetic rule of Egypt, and the birth of her son with Caesar, led to growing discontent among many in Rome. To some, she represented a threat to Roman power and values. She was, after all, a foreign monarch who had a direct stake in the future of both Egypt and Rome. The fact that she had a child with Caesar, whom some hoped would be the future ruler of Rome, made her a central figure in the bitter political struggles that were already unfolding in the city. This stirred resentment among many of Caesar's political enemies. Cleopatra was viewed as an outsider, a symbol of the Roman elite's vulnerability to foreign influence. Caesar's enemies were quick to take advantage of this sentiment, using Cleopatra's presence in Rome to fuel anti-Cleopatra propaganda. The Queen of Egypt became a symbol of everything that the Roman elite feared: foreign influence, unchecked power, and the collapse of the Republic. Yet, despite the controversy, Cleopatra's time in Rome was not without benefit. Her relationship with Caesar solidified her position as the ruler of Egypt, and her political alliance with Rome, through Caesar and later through Caesarion, would ensure that Egypt remained an important player in the Mediterranean world. As long as Cleopatra had the backing of Caesar and the Roman elite, she could continue to exercise her power both in Egypt and beyond. But Cleopatra's world would soon unravel. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was assassinated in a brutal and shocking act. His death plunged Rome into political chaos and left Cleopatra vulnerable once again. With Caesar's death, Cleopatra's position became precarious. Her son, Caesarion, was now at the mercy of the political factions vying for power in Rome. Cleopatra quickly returned to Egypt, hoping to preserve her kingdom's stability in the face of growing unrest in Rome. She now had to navigate a world where her allies were increasingly divided, and her son, whom she had hoped would be the future of both Egypt and Rome, became a symbol of political division. Caesar's assassination shifted the Roman political landscape and marked the end of Cleopatra's political partnership with Julius Caesar. Despite her continued efforts to maintain her power and influence, Cleopatra's alliance with Rome was no longer secure. But she was not one to give up easily. In the years that followed, Cleopatra would once again seek alliances to secure her position, this time with the rising Roman general, Mark Antony. Cleopatra's life, full of drama, political intrigue, and personal ambition, was marked by her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of ancient politics. She was not just a seductress or a romantic figure. She was a brilliant strategist and a ruler who fought to protect her kingdom in a world dominated by powerful men. Her union with Julius Caesar and the birth of Caesarion were key moments in her reign, each representing a calculated step to ensure Egypt's future. Though Cleopatra's reign ended in tragedy, her legacy has lived on for millennia. The image of Cleopatra, both as a ruler and a woman, has been immortalized in art, literature, and film. The story of Cleopatra is one of resilience, intelligence, and an unyielding determination to shape the course of history. She remains one of the most iconic figures in world history. A queen who understood the power of alliances, the weight of her own intellect, and the deep connections between politics and legacy. The death of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE left Cleopatra in a precarious position. Her political alliance with Caesar had been the cornerstone of her power, both in Egypt and in the broader Mediterranean world. When Caesar was assassinated, the stability that he provided for Cleopatra was shattered. With Caesar gone, her future was uncertain. The political landscape in Rome became chaotic, and her once solid ties to the Roman elite seemed to crumble overnight. Cleopatra returned to Egypt, her kingdom still facing internal challenges. The once bitter rivals in Egypt had been dealt with, but the turmoil in Rome threatened to spill over into her realm. What Cleopatra needed now was a new strategy, a new ally. She had survived through political acumen, intelligence, and an ability to forge alliances that furthered her ambitions. Now, with Rome in turmoil, Cleopatra's options were limited. Yet, in the world of politics and power, opportunity often arises from unexpected places. It was at this crossroads that Cleopatra's fate would take another dramatic turn. Rome, reeling from Caesar's assassination, saw its future entwined with its military leaders, and one man in particular was poised to rise to prominence: Mark Antony. Mark Antony was one of the key figures in the aftermath of Caesar's assassination. He was a general, a loyal supporter of Caesar, and now, as part of the Second Triumvirate alongside Octavian and Lepidus, he wielded significant power. Antony's rise was inevitable, and Cleopatra, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity to solidify her position. But Cleopatra was not merely looking for a political alliance. She was seeking a partnership that could secure her throne and Egypt's future in a volatile time. In 41 BCE, Cleopatra set sail for Tarsus, a Roman city under the control of Antony. She knew that if she wanted to captivate Antony and secure his support, she had to make an unforgettable entrance. Cleopatra was never one to do things halfway, and so she arrived on a gilded barge, adorned in royal splendor. She was dressed as the goddess Isis, her presence as grand and regal as the mythological figure herself. Her dramatic arrival was designed to impress, to awe, and to seduce. Cleopatra knew that she was not only presenting herself as a powerful ruler but also as a goddess, a divine figure with whom Antony could forge an unbreakable bond. As she sailed down the river, her barge was surrounded by attendants, musicians, and perfumed sails, an image that seemed to blur the line between reality and myth. It was a theatrical display of wealth, power, and allure, crafted to ensure Antony saw her as more than just a queen but as an iconic figure, someone to be revered. Antony was struck by her beauty, but more importantly, he was captivated by her intellect and ambition. Cleopatra, in turn, recognized that Antony was not only a powerful Roman general but also a man with his own political aspirations. This was the beginning of a relationship that would become both a personal and political partnership. What began as a calculated political move soon turned into a passionate love affair. Cleopatra and Antony spent more and more time together, their bond growing stronger by the day. For Antony, Cleopatra was an alluring and powerful queen, a woman who could offer him the wealth and resources of Egypt and the prestige of an Eastern empire. For Cleopatra, Antony represented a powerful Roman ally, a man whose military prowess could help her secure Egypt's position in the ever-changing political landscape of the Mediterranean. Together, Cleopatra and Antony made plans to expand their influence. Their relationship was not just a love story. It was a political alliance meant to secure power and challenge their enemies. Cleopatra, in many ways, transformed her relationship with Antony into a means of presenting Egypt as a force to be reckoned with, not just in the East but in the broader Roman world. The couple's influence was not limited to their political ambitions. Cleopatra and Antony styled themselves as divine rulers, presenting themselves as the new couple to rule the known world. They adopted titles and symbols that reflected their status, including the use of Egyptian regalia and the association with the gods. Cleopatra, as the goddess Isis, and Antony, as the living god Osiris, became symbols of power, divinity, and eternal rule. This image of divine rule resonated deeply with their supporters, but it also incited opposition. While their love affair was passionate, it was also highly controversial. Antony's enemies, both in Rome and in the military, began to see Cleopatra's growing influence over him as a threat. They feared that Cleopatra and Antony's union would undermine Rome's values and pose a challenge to the Republic. For these critics, the alliance between Antony and Cleopatra symbolized the erosion of Roman authority and the rise of Eastern influence in the heart of the empire. As Cleopatra and Antony's relationship deepened, the reaction in Rome grew increasingly hostile. Roman elites saw Cleopatra as a foreign queen who was manipulating Antony for her own gain. They used this narrative to paint her as a manipulative seductress, bent on destroying the very fabric of Rome. The propaganda machine was swift to label Cleopatra as the ultimate villain in this political drama, portraying her as a scheming foreigner who was undermining the strength of Rome by ensnaring one of its most powerful generals. For Antony, the consequences were severe. His political opponents in Rome were eager to capitalize on the growing tension between him and his Roman counterparts. They painted him as a puppet of Cleopatra, a man who had been corrupted by the charms of an Eastern queen. This portrayal of Antony as weak and under Cleopatra's control only fueled the animosity toward the relationship. The couple's image in Rome became that of a threat, a vision of a future where Egypt and Rome might be ruled by a foreign queen and a general who had forgotten his loyalty to the Republic. The propaganda machine in Rome depicted Antony's relationship with Cleopatra as a danger to the Republic. In their eyes, the growing bond between the two monarchs was a betrayal of Roman values. Antony was accused of abandoning his Roman duties and priorities in favor of Cleopatra's ambitions. This fueled a political war of words that would eventually lead to military conflict. The political tension between Antony and Rome finally boiled over in 31 BCE, when Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, declared war on Antony and Cleopatra. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Actium, a decisive naval battle in which Antony and Cleopatra's forces were defeated by Octavian's fleet. The defeat marked the beginning of the end for both Antony and Cleopatra. Antony, despite his military prowess, was unable to overcome the combined forces of Rome, and Cleopatra's reign in Egypt crumbled. After the battle, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria, where they took their own lives in 30 BCE, marking the final chapter in a tumultuous relationship that had rocked both Egypt and Rome to their foundations. Cleopatra and Antony's story is one of passion, power, and political intrigue. Their love affair transcended personal desire, becoming a calculated political move that reshaped the political landscape of their time. Their union was seen by many as a threat to Rome's power, and it was used as propaganda to fuel the war that ultimately led to their downfall. Yet, despite the tragic end, the legacy of Cleopatra and Antony endures. Their love story has been immortalized in art, literature, and film, becoming a symbol of the collision between Eastern opulence and Roman power, between love and politics, and between personal ambition and the destiny of empires. Cleopatra, once the Queen of Egypt, will forever be remembered not just as a seductress but as a brilliant strategist who sought to secure her kingdom and legacy in a world dominated by men. Antony, too, is remembered not just for his military skills but for his ill-fated decision to follow his heart, even when it led him down a path of destruction. Together, they remain one of history's most fascinating and tragic couples. The Roman world in the 1st century BCE was a land of political intrigue, shifting alliances, and the struggle for power. After the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE, the once unified Roman Republic fell into a state of turmoil, as different factions vied for control of the empire. Julius Caesar's adopted heir Octavian quickly emerged as a powerful figure in Roman politics, but his path to ultimate power was complicated by his rivalry with two key figures: Mark Antony and Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Antony, one of Rome's most prominent generals, was deeply connected to Caesar's legacy. He had fought in Caesar's campaigns, and after Caesar's death, Antony believed he should have inherited the mantle of leadership. Cleopatra, the seductive and powerful ruler of Egypt, had formed a political and personal alliance with Antony that threatened Octavian's hold on Rome. Their union, forged in love and ambition, was seen by many as a challenge to the traditional Roman order. But in the years leading up to the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, the political chess game between Octavian and Antony intensified. Both men sought control, and their rivalry became the defining struggle of the era. The relationship between Cleopatra and Antony had begun as a political alliance. Cleopatra, seeking to secure Egypt's place in a Roman-dominated world, needed Antony's support to maintain her throne against internal challenges. For Antony, Egypt's resources and Cleopatra's influence were invaluable in his bid for power. What began as a political partnership, however, quickly blossomed into a passionate love affair. Their bond was not only personal but strategic. Together, they envisioned an empire stretching from the Mediterranean to the east, with Antony leading the Roman legions and Cleopatra ruling Egypt. They presented themselves as divine rulers, reinforcing their power with symbols of Egyptian gods and aligning themselves with divine authority. Cleopatra styled herself as the goddess Isis, and Antony adopted the role of Osiris. This image of divine rule was powerful and resonated with their supporters in Egypt and beyond. However, this growing union alarmed many in Rome, including Octavian, who had inherited Caesar's legacy and was determined to protect Rome's interests. The political dynamics of the Roman world were shifting, and as Cleopatra and Antony's influence grew, so did Octavian's opposition. The rivalry between Octavian and Antony escalated as the years passed. Octavian began to position himself as the defender of the Roman Republic, claiming that Antony had become a pawn of Cleopatra and that his loyalty to Rome was in question. Roman propaganda painted Cleopatra as a manipulative foreign queen who was corrupting Antony and leading him astray. Octavian capitalized on this narrative, portraying Cleopatra as a threat to Roman values and suggesting that Antony was more loyal to his Egyptian lover than to the Roman people. As the propaganda war intensified, Antony's position in Rome grew increasingly precarious. He was labeled a traitor by his enemies, and his relationship with Cleopatra was used to fuel public sentiment against him. In Rome, Antony was portrayed as a man who had abandoned his Roman duties for the luxuries of Egypt. The Roman Senate, long wary of Cleopatra's influence, sided with Octavian, declaring war on both Antony and Cleopatra. It was now clear that war was inevitable. The Battle of Actium, the final confrontation between the forces of Octavian and those of Antony and Cleopatra, was on the horizon. In 31 BCE, the two rival factions met at the Battle of Actium, a naval engagement that would determine the future of Rome and Egypt. The battle took place off the coast of Greece, near the Ionian Sea, and it would go down in history as one of the most decisive conflicts in the ancient world. Antony and Cleopatra's forces, which included a large fleet, initially seemed poised for victory. However, Octavian's fleet, commanded by his general Agrippa, proved to be more strategic and better prepared for the battle. Antony and Cleopatra, despite their initial success, were soon outmaneuvered. The turning point came when Cleopatra's fleet, seeing the tide of battle turning against them, fled the scene. Antony, in a desperate attempt to follow her, abandoned the fight. This retreat was a disastrous blow to their cause. With Antony and Cleopatra's forces defeated, the dream of a combined Roman-Egyptian empire was shattered. Octavian had decisively triumphed, and the balance of power had shifted irrevocably in his favor. The loss at Actium marked the beginning of the end for both Antony and Cleopatra. In the wake of their defeat, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria, the capital of Egypt. Their hopes of maintaining their rule were fading quickly. Octavian's forces were closing in, and the reality of their situation became increasingly grim. Antony, devastated by the loss at Actium and by the sense of betrayal he felt, received false news that Cleopatra had taken her own life. Heartbroken and in despair, Antony fell on his own sword in an act of self-inflicted death. When he learned that Cleopatra was still alive, it was too late. Antony succumbed to his wounds, passing away in Cleopatra's arms. Antony's death was a tragic end to the life of one of Rome's greatest generals, a man who had once stood at the pinnacle of Roman power. His demise marked the collapse of any hope for the future of his and Cleopatra's shared ambitions. The political landscape had shifted irreparably, and Antony's death was a key moment in the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. With Antony's death, Cleopatra found herself in a dire situation. Octavian's victory at Actium left her with no allies and no options. She had fought to the bitter end for her kingdom, but it was clear that Octavian would not stop until Egypt had fallen completely under his control. Rather than submit to Octavian's forces and be paraded through Rome as a captive, Cleopatra made a fateful decision. She chose to die on her own terms, refusing to become a symbol of Rome's victory. According to legend, Cleopatra allowed herself to be bitten by a venomous asp, a snake that symbolized the ancient Egyptian gods and the end of her reign. The manner of her death, though it remains shrouded in mystery, has become one of the most iconic images of ancient history. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt and the beginning of Egypt's annexation as a province of the Roman Empire. At just 39 years old, Cleopatra's life came to a tragic close. She had ruled Egypt for over 2 decades, and her reign had been marked by political cunning, romantic entanglements, and her unyielding desire to protect her kingdom. Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era for Egypt. Octavian, now firmly in control, transformed Egypt into a Roman province, and the once great kingdom became just another part of the Roman Empire. Despite her tragic end, Cleopatra's legacy would live on, not only as a powerful queen but also as a symbol of political intrigue and resilience. Her story would be remembered for centuries, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and theater. Antony, too, would be remembered as a tragic hero, a man whose great potential was undone by his passion for Cleopatra and his misplaced loyalty to her. His death marked the end of one of the most important military careers in Roman history. Together, Cleopatra and Antony's story became one of the most enduring and tragic romances in history. Their rise and fall encapsulated the tumultuous nature of Roman politics and the allure of power, ambition, and love. In their pursuit of greatness, they changed the course of history, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate the world to this day. The events of 31 BCE, the Battle of Actium, and the subsequent deaths of Antony and Cleopatra were more than just the end of an empire. They were the final chapter in a tale of love, ambition, betrayal, and tragedy. Their story remains one of the most compelling narratives in world history, an enduring legacy that continues to inspire and captivate generations. As the curtain fell on Cleopatra and Antony's reign, the world shifted, and the Roman Empire solidified its dominance over the Mediterranean world. Yet, despite their defeat, the names of Cleopatra and Antony live on, forever etched in the annals of history as figures who sought to defy fate, and in doing so, changed the course of history. Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE was a watershed moment in history. As the last pharaoh of Egypt, her passing marked the definitive end of Egypt's independence. The once great kingdom, with its storied dynasties and cultural splendor, became a mere province within the mighty Roman Empire. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated. Egypt, long an ancient powerhouse, had surrendered its sovereignty to the expanding Roman Empire under the rule of Octavian, later known as Augustus. But while Cleopatra's death ended Egypt's reign as an independent kingdom, it did not mean that her legacy would fade into the annals of time. Instead, her story endured, immortalized in art, literature, and film. She has become one of history's most famous and enigmatic figures, a subject of fascination for scholars, historians, and the public alike. But who exactly was Cleopatra? Was she a ruthless seductress who used her charm to manipulate powerful men, or was she a brilliant strategist who fought tirelessly to preserve her nation and her people? Perhaps, as history often teaches us, the truth lies somewhere in between. Cleopatra's life, when looked at through a historical lens, is anything but simple. She was a woman who was faced with immense political and personal challenges, but who rose to power through intellect, charisma, and sheer determination. Born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a family of Greek origin that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great's empire fragmented, Cleopatra's early life was marked by the complexities of dynastic politics. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was not a strong leader, and Cleopatra's rise to power was anything but assured. When she became queen at the age of 18, alongside her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, Egypt was in turmoil. What followed was not a simple tale of royal privilege and ease. Cleopatra had to navigate a world full of political intrigue, court conspiracies, and the constant threat of external forces, namely the Romans, who sought to control Egypt and its rich resources. Cleopatra's ability to outmaneuver her opponents, both within her own court and in the wider Mediterranean world, was a testament to her cunning, her resolve, and her intellect. She was not a mere figurehead. She was a ruler in her own right, guiding Egypt through some of its most turbulent times. Cleopatra's relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony are often central to how she is remembered in the modern imagination. These alliances are often framed as examples of her supposed seduction of powerful men. But was Cleopatra truly a manipulative seductress who used her charm to influence these mighty figures? Or was she a political genius who used these relationships as strategic alliances to safeguard Egypt's sovereignty? Let's start with Julius Caesar. When Caesar came to Egypt in 48 BCE, Cleopatra was already embroiled in a power struggle with her brother, Ptolemy XIII. She had been exiled, and her rule was in jeopardy. Cleopatra recognized an opportunity when Caesar arrived in Alexandria. Rather than appeal to him directly, she orchestrated one of the most dramatic entrances in history. Smuggled into Caesar's quarters, wrapped up in a carpet. This was a bold, almost theatrical move that captured Caesar's attention, and from that moment, a powerful alliance was forged. Together, they defeated Ptolemy XIII, and Cleopatra was restored to the throne. Their union was not just personal but political. Cleopatra had a vision for Egypt's future, and she saw Caesar as a key ally in realizing that vision. She even traveled to Rome, further cementing her relationship with Caesar. Their alliance produced a son, Ptolemy XV, known as Caesarion. By presenting her son as Caesar's heir, Cleopatra was positioning her dynasty as a bridge between Egypt and Rome, creating a long-term plan for the future of her kingdom. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra returned to Egypt, her relationship with Rome now uncertain. This is when Mark Antony, Caesar's ally and one of the most powerful men in Rome, came into the picture. Again, Cleopatra was not merely seeking a romantic relationship but a strategic alliance. She and Antony spent years together, and their relationship grew into a powerful partnership, both politically and personally. The two ruled the eastern Mediterranean together, and their vision of power was one of grand ambition, with Cleopatra and Antony presenting themselves as divine rulers, Antony as the Roman consul and Cleopatra as the Queen of Egypt. But once again, Cleopatra's relationship with Antony would be used against her. Octavian, who had emerged as the rival to Antony's power, and his supporters portrayed Cleopatra as a seductress who had led Antony astray, branding her as a threat to Rome's very existence. This depiction of Cleopatra as a manipulative foreign woman using her allure to control Roman men is one that has persisted throughout history. Despite these portrayals, Cleopatra was much more than a woman using her beauty and charm to seduce powerful men. She was a formidable leader in her own right. She was highly educated, fluent in several languages, and a keen strategist who understood the importance of alliances in the volatile world of ancient politics. Cleopatra wasn't simply a passive player in the drama of history. She was an active participant, always working to secure the future of her kingdom. Her resilience and intellect were integral to her success. Cleopatra's reign was not defined by her relationships with powerful men, but by her ability to navigate the complex world of Roman politics and protect Egypt's interests. When her kingdom was at risk, she didn't hesitate to make bold decisions. Whether it was her daring entrance to Caesar's quarters, her alliance with Antony, or her ability to manipulate the political tides to her advantage, Cleopatra proved time and again that she was a force to be reckoned with. Cleopatra's legacy transcends her time. She is perhaps one of the most immortalized figures in history, having been the subject of countless works of art, literature, and film. From William Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra to Hollywood films like Cleopatra, 1963, her life story has captivated audiences for centuries. She has been portrayed as everything from a tragic heroine to a conniving seductress, and her legacy continues to inspire new interpretations of her life. The way Cleopatra has been depicted throughout history speaks volumes about the cultural narratives we have created around her. In ancient times, she was admired for her wisdom and strength. In later periods, however, her image became entangled with ideas about femininity, seduction, and power. The way that we view Cleopatra, whether as a symbol of female power or as a political pawn, says just as much about us as it does about her. One of the most enduring aspects of Cleopatra's legacy is the way in which she is remembered as a symbol of female strength. In a world dominated by powerful men, Cleopatra stood out as a woman who not only ruled a kingdom but also shaped the course of history. She was a queen who ruled on her own terms, refusing to be diminished by the male-dominated political world around her. Cleopatra's story is a reminder that women have always had the power to shape history, even when the odds were stacked against them. She broke through barriers, forging alliances and taking bold actions that have echoed down through history. Her intelligence, political acumen, and resilience made her one of the most powerful women to ever live, and her legacy continues to inspire women around the world today. Cleopatra's death may have marked the end of Egypt's independence, but it also marked the beginning of a lasting legacy. She was a queen who fought for her kingdom, for her people, and for her own survival in a world that often sought to diminish her. Her legacy is a testament to the power of resilience and intellect, showing that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one can still shape the future. Cleopatra remains a symbol of female strength, a powerful reminder that women, too, can wield immense influence and change the course of history. As we continue to uncover the truths behind her legend, one thing is certain. Cleopatra VII was not just a queen of Egypt, she was a force to be reckoned with, and her story will continue to captivate and inspire generations to come. This video was sponsored by Vita Verde Elixir. Promotes hair growth, strengthens hair, nourishes the scalp, restores shine and vitality, and it is suitable for all hair types and for the whole family. You can order on their website. The link is in the description of this video. In our next video, we will look at the life of Hypatia, philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer from Alexandria, martyred for her knowledge.